mean, I feel for Florida State. I mean, they did everything they needed to do. They won their conference. They're 13-0. I was actually looking somewhat forward to Florida State making the playoff because I was prepared to make the case that I think their defense could maybe win them a game in the college football playoff. But here we are.
I think against Michigan or Washington, it might put them in. It might put them in a game. I think the teams with Michael Penix and JJ McCarthy win those games. But Florida State's defense is good enough to keep them in a game. Yes. But I don't think Florida State has the right to be the most mad team. I think it's Georgia. I think Georgia.
Florida State.
Georgia. I asked somebody in Vegas. Georgia would be a 14.5-point favorite over Florida State. Georgia is clearly a better football team than Florida State. It is not close. It's not close. Not without Jordan Travis. And here's ultimately my problem though. If I think they're the maddest team, and you think it's Florida State, which is totally fine. Like again, Ohio State fans are unrepresented in this conversation, and they should be mad too because they did almost everything that all these other teams have done. I think Washington, with the worst defense in this group, the problem is they were never going to leave a team out with its star quarterback, with a good strength. Because here's the other thing. Florida State didn't have the strength of schedule either. So you look at Georgia's strength of schedule, you look at losing to Alabama, that's the reason they left Georgia out. And the reason they left Florida State out is Jordan Travis. And the reason they left Ohio State out is not winning the division. All three of those reasons aren't great reasons to leave those three teams out. If I'm putting my four best teams in, who do I think, watching every college football game this season, who do I think the four best teams are? I think it's Michigan, Georgia, Texas, and Alabama. I think those are the four best teams in college football this year. So if I was on a committee of one, and I know Washington fans, you're screaming and you're angry, and I get it, good strength of schedule. It's the number, like all the one score games. You're basically this year's version of TCU. You belong there. You're a great team. You belong in the playoff. I'm not angry you're in the playoff. I don't think you are better than Georgia. I don't think you would beat Georgia. I think Georgia's better. I don't think I can say that about Florida State. I would pick Washington against Florida State in a game right now.
Right. If Jordan Travis was the quarterback, I'm not picking Washington to beat Florida State. But that's totally a separate discussion.
Right. I agree. We all agree with that.
Right.
But this is where we are, man.
Right. I mean, like we said, it goes back to the most basic, and it's sort of a simple concept is somebody was going to get left out today. There were 5. I think, you disagree that you had more teams. I thought there was 5 for 4 spots. Somebody's going to get left out.
Well, explain to me why Georgia loses 3 points to Alabama, and as the most dominant, most clearly number one team out of your mouth, you said Georgia is the most clearly the number. How is it that they can go from 1 to behind a team they'd be a 2-touchdown favorite over who can't score points on offense? Why is it that they belong behind Florida State?
I think I go back to my version of college football, which is the regular season is an extended version of the playoff. Georgia had its chance. The SEC championship game was a semifinal. I know I'm in agreement with you. I think Georgia's one of the best 4 teams on a neutral field. It's just it's the path. They've had a chance to play their way in. They lost. And now you go to Washington as an undefeated 13-0 team. I know exactly what you're saying about Washington's defense. We've doubted them, though. I mean, we picked against them against Oregon in the first game, the second game, and against Oregon State, and they find ways to win.
I know.
And
they're they're totally deserving. They're a great team. Great team.
That Washington team that showed up on Friday night was a much different Washington team than we have seen at times this year. Defensively, they are timely. They've run. Dylan Johnson can run the ball. The physicality they play with. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Texas is just going to steamroll.
No,
Washington.
No.
So
I agree.
The point of this conversation is you and I can disagree. There can be 4 or 5 people arguing, and I think to some extent we're all right about this.
But you don't disagree with what they did though. The 4 that they put in, I have come around to that. I think that is the 4 they should have put in. I don't think it's the 4 best teams.
I wrestled with this. I started thinking about this Thursday night, right before the games on Friday. Man, I don't know. It's hard for me to leave Florida State out, but then again, I go back to if Florida State has the quarterback, I think they're in. I think the variable the committee can look at, and it's in their committee bylaws, that the injury to a key player, and that's an easy out for the committee. So they probably took the easiest path. You're saying that, look, Florida State doesn't have its star quarterback. We know they're 13-0. They've got a great defense, but we just think Alabama's better. Alabama just beat the number 1 team in the country. And that probably has to, and if you think Texas is in, it's sort of Texas probably carried Alabama over the finish line for that last spot in
Well,
Alabama's win too.
I think it's about how you frame the question. It's not like, why did you put Texas in? Why did you put Alabama in? Why did you put Washington in? You don't need to ask that question of any of the 7 teams because they all deserve it. I think the question is they had to ask it in a different way for the first time ever in 10 years. And that is, we've got to find reasons to leave you out.
And it's very easy.
And it's very easy with Ohio State. Didn't win their division, didn't play in a conference championship. I think that's stupid. I think that's a stupid rule to use to deny what Ohio State accomplished this year. I have no excuse for what they've done to Georgia. They didn't win their conference championship. I don't. They were number 1 in the nation 2 days ago. I don't understand.
I have a interesting kind of wild card scenario I was prepared to throw out there. What if the committee just decided, like, we don't want to make this decision. Let's just drop Georgia from 1
That's what it is.
to 4.
That's I think they did it. Yeah. I think they dropped them to 5 or 6. I think they belong at 5 at least, but it doesn't matter. It's like out of the playoff. I think that, again, it is, you have to find a reason to put a team out of the 4. You don't have to convince me of why Texas belongs or why Alabama belongs or why Michigan belongs or why Washington belongs. Reasonable minds can disagree on the margins about those teams. You don't have to, if they put Georgia in the playoff, I don't think you need to explain it. You don't need to explain it. But it's easier to explain the 3 that they left out for 3 specific reasons. Now, I don't agree that because this is my problem. If Michigan had to play Georgia or Alabama in a Big Ten championship game, we'd be having, instead of Iowa, we'd be having a different conversation. If Texas had to play Alabama or Georgia in a Big 12 championship game instead of Oklahoma State, because these conferences were aligned geographically 100 years ago arbitrarily, which is why I don't understand people's inability to understand context within the conferences. If Washington had to play Georgia or Alabama, or maybe even Texas, which they're going to get to do, or Michigan, which they're going to get to do in the future in the Big Ten, their record would be Florida. If Florida State had to play Georgia or Alabama in the SEC championship game, they would not be undefeated, because without Jordan Travis, they would not have won that game. I'm sorry, they wouldn't have. Anyway.
Hey,
do you think they did the right? Do you think they put the 4 that?
So first, I wanted to point something out that about at 10 o'clock at night on Saturday. So I don't think the Big Ten championship game was done. The ACC championship game wasn't done. At 10 o'clock at night on Saturday, the only team that was guaranteed in the playoff was Washington. The Pac-12, the last year of the Pac-12, and its champion was the only guaranteed team in. Unfortunately, kind of a frustrating thing that we've talked about many times in here. But no, you know what? I've wrestled with this a lot. Like I said, at first I was ready to say, you know what? I think Florida State they got totally screwed in this. But again, there's only 4 spots. One team's going to get left out. And I came back to the thought that if the committee's choosing the best teams and they have the easy out on Florida State, that's probably the right call. I mean, again, I could talk myself into either one of these scenarios.
Georgia also completely, totally screwed. They would be a 14 or 15 point, according to Vegas, they'd be a 15-point favorite over Florida State today on a neutral field. So you can't tell me that the team is a 2 touchdown underdog, didn't also a favorite over Florida State, didn't also get screwed. But we knew that going into this. We knew that there could be a chaotic situation. And Jalen Milroe's ability to make plays and the way they finished that game against Georgia, and we don't really get to talk about the games much on this episode. It's more about the resumes, and I think best and deserving are the same thing. I think that's not the committee's job is not foremost deserving. It's why I feel dirty when I say that Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Texas are the best 4. I don't like that. I feel dirty. But I think they would all. I don't think Washington is the quote unquote better team than Georgia. So, I'm fine with them at 2. I think it's totally fine. They deserve it.
But I do think the committee at times has sort of waffled on the most deserving and best. And to be fair, the bylaws of the committee and sort of the instructions they're supposed to use are a little vague, probably a little vague for a reason, for years like this and other ones, to where they can just say, look, this is the criteria. We just think they're the best 4. Travis's injury hits Florida State. They got to be out.